Good morning. I'm here with Mark, and this is something we're going to try that's going to be new. We're going to have coffee as much as we can on Monday mornings, and we're just going to talk about the message from yesterday. And we're going to talk about some things sometimes, like yesterday specifically, 42 verses of Scripture. A ton of material. I felt like as I was preparing for yesterday's sermon, there could be 3 sermons in those 42 verses. And so there's a lot of material maybe we didn't cover. Sometimes there's a stuff that I have that for time's sake doesn't make it in the sermon that we can talk about. And sometimes Mark just may be sitting there and be like, what is he talking about? And he may have some questions for me, or I might have questions for him when he preaches, and we can just kind of have a conversation about that material and hopefully engage you, church, or even people who don't go to our church, engage them in this conversation, and hopefully just something helpful to sort of help us digest what we heard on Sunday. So today we're going to start, we were in John chapter 4 yesterday. We were talking about the woman at the well, and we specifically talked about her story because our series is called, Changed Lives. And we're looking at how people's lives changed when they encountered Jesus. But there's a lot of material in and around her story that didn't necessarily directly connect to her life change that's really important. So I know you had one of those thoughts, Mark. Why don't we start there? What was one of the things in the text that you felt like we didn't maybe give a ton of time to that we could?
Yeah. First of all, let me say I'm really excited about this series, Changed Lives, and we're going to have a testimony each week. Jordan's yesterday was really good, and so that's something to look forward to. One of the parts of John 4 that have always caused me to question is where Jesus says we are to worship in spirit and in truth. And you mentioned about the big argument then was where to worship, Jerusalem or Samaria. Jesus, just talks about we worship in spirit and truth, and I don't remember exactly where it's at. And I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Sure. So can I read exactly what he said? It starts in verse 21. She asked the question, that she perceived he was a prophet. She said, our fathers worshipped on this mountain. The Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. And, Jesus said to her, verse 21, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth.
Yeah. How do you worship in spirit and in truth?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that you could say there. One of my thoughts with what Jesus is talking about, one of the things that's important for me when I worship, I know, is engaging my heart and my mind.
Okay.
And so that's one way you can go with the spirit and truth thing.
Yeah.
That I want my heart and my mind engaged in what I'm doing every day. I should be getting to know him more, which is engaging my mind, but then my heart engages in just, I had some notes here and some things I was thinking about. There's a psalm, Psalm 116, and it's verse 12, and it talks about rendering our hearts to God in worship. And it's this idea of rendering is this idea of giving back to him or returning to him. And so, for all that he's done to benefit me, it talks about he's dealt with me fully. Yeah. And so I'm rendering my love back to him. And worship is doing something toward God because he benefited me.
So it's both
because of who he is.
Yeah.
And so that's the heart part of it for me, engaging in that all of who he is and what he has done.
Yeah.
And my mind in how I know him. And so I think that's part of it. That doesn't necessarily probably get at all of it, but
Well, I haven't done a lot of in-depth study on that, but just from the surface, I think you're on the right track. And different way of thinking. There's a rational side of worship, and there's the emotional side. And when I grew up, some of the older people remember this. Church was very rational. It just seemed like it was all head knowledge and all that. And one of the developments that happened over the years is we just got more to the emotional side of it, which I think is good. And you go too far either way on that.
Yeah.
So there's a balance there.
no, I definitely think today feelings
Yeah.
are more emphasized,
Yeah.
maybe over
Yeah.
the rationale.
Ryan, I remember the first time, it was an eye-opener to me. This is back in the early 80s. The worship service was always about the sermon. And the music were the preliminaries. Seriously, we would use those kind of terms. It was all about the sermon. And I remember the first time I heard a lady say, "Man, I really like the worship, the music." And that's the first time I'd heard that in all my years of ministry. And that transition started happening. Now people, and I think it's healthy, they like the whole package of what happens on Sunday morning. The sermon is part of it, but man, it's the whole experience.
Yeah.
Mind and heart, like you say.
I think taking her story, and being able to why does he say that within this whole thing? She knows, and it's clear, I talked about it in the sermon yesterday, she knows about the Messiah.
Yeah.
She doesn't know he is him. And so, there's also, that's where I was going, with the heart and the mind thing. I really do think, with that Psalm 116 thing, I had this statement in my notes: you can't and won't fully understand worship until you fully realize what God's done for you.
Yeah.
And
so
so
worship is a response.
So it was both her knowing what God was doing through the Messiah,
Yeah.
but also just he was trying to connect her in relationship with him, also just know me. And
Yeah.
so there's this personal aspect to it, but then there's also this greater, this is what he's doing for the world.
Yeah.
And connecting those two things in our response to him is our worship. I don't know though,
Well, I think you're on track there, and again, I haven't done a lot of study on that. Change tracks a little bit. I want to go back to your sermon. What you brought up about the woman, not necessarily being an immoral woman. It's possible she was barren. I thought that was all really good stuff. The thing is, and you came back to this, no matter what her situation was, she was alone. And it got to me thinking how Jesus seeks out these fringe people, basically people that are isolated or somehow on the fringe of society. And it seemed like they're the most open to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we learn something from him on that, if that's not the same today.
Yeah. No, I mean, people who connect with Jesus and stay connected with Jesus are the people who identify their need for him.
Yeah, they're...
I think when we were talking earlier this morning, the word you used was desperate.
Yeah.
I mean, when you are desperate for Jesus because you understand your need,
Yeah.
why you need to know him,
Yeah.
I think your relationship and the satisfaction that you get from that is so much greater because it's meeting that need. But if you haven't, and that's why I think it's huge that Jesus, instead of necessarily leaning into a sinful promiscuity, whether he's doing that or he's leaning into man, like, you actually,
Well,
you actually have this situation that's out of your control.
Yeah.
That, you know, you didn't choose, but you still have this great brokenness because of it. Either way, he's speaking to her need.
Yeah.
And neither one necessarily makes the point, I think, of the text wrong.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think it's significant. We miss this. Jesus spoke to a woman he had no business speaking to. You know, for one thing, she was a woman, and man to speak to a woman privately would have been taboo. But just Samaritan and all this kind of stuff. So again, that's instructive. I remember hearing something years ago, and it's always stuck with me. Everyone is a prospect. Everyone you meet, you just don't know. I mean, there's people we think, man, they're going to be open to the gospel, and nothing happens. And then there's other people who think there's no way, and they end up being some of the most committed believers you ever run into. So everyone's a prospect. We just need to keep that in mind in our daily walk and, interactions with people. So, anyway, that was a good message. I appreciated that. I think more and more, of course, about the food aspect I brought out in the communion meditation. Jesus said, my food is to do the mission, to do the work of God. And then he talks about the fields being white unto harvest. And in our culture today, they're becoming whiter and bigger and bigger. There's more and more of a need. More and more thirsty people out there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I had mentioned, like, that confused me even, and it plays into that, like, I was confused at the beginning. We set it up yesterday that there's such a divide between the Samaritans and the Jews.
Yeah.
Jews avoided traveling through Samaria, didn't want, to be there, maybe didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Felt, Samaritans were all wrong. Samaritans felt Jews were all wrong. Like, it was just, there was, and at the beginning of it's in verse 4, it says, he had to pass through Samaria. Like, why? I always struggled with that because I'm like, no, he didn't. Like,
right.
A lot of them didn't. They went the long way around because they avoided it. But you look at it saying he had to pass through Samaria. Why? I think the answer is what you just said. He says it later in the text, like, my food is to do the will of my Father. So it's almost like, hey, here's this harvest rich area. I have to go there. Yeah. I have to be there because I'm so on mission. Like, I'm not sure that we live that way. But that's what we're trying, like, we talk about be the one and this 3-year vision we have that we want to be going, growing, guiding. Like, it's all about being mission minded. Yeah. There's a harvest to be had, and whether we're the sower or the reaper, that's where we're supposed to be. Yeah. So.
Very true. Anyway, it's a great passage. I know years ago I preached on it, and I took more of Jesus' approach, how to reach out, how to evangelize, and one of the things he just associated with people of all different stripes. And I think we need to get out of I call it Christian ghetto. And I see it here Sunday mornings, I see it some on Wednesday nights where people are sitting by themselves and we're off with our friends, and we need to be more, have our eyes open to that and be more open to people and reaching out to them, just even on Sunday morning.
Yeah. Well, and he's so obvious about it.
Yes.
We were talking about that. He just takes the very simplest, obvious things to start the conversation.
Yeah,
like
that's a good
water
point.
And food.
Yeah, and she came for water.
The disciples went for food.
Yeah.
So he talks to them about food, but either way, like, he bridges a gap over something that is a really basic life thing for them.
which I think our Be the One Go team is working on some evangelism training eventually. So you'll be hearing more about that in the weeks to come, I'm sure. How do you make those bridges? How do you bridge those gaps?
Yeah. And how do you talk to people without feeling awkward?
Yeah.
You know, because
today's
sometimes
culture,
I think that's a huge part of it is people are just like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have anything in common. I don't know. And it's like, well, that doesn't matter.
Right.
Not as much as you think it does anyway.
I say one thing you can do is pray for someone. At the very least, you can pray. And I have found when I actually pray, asking God for an opportunity to witness to a person, he gives that opportunity sooner or later. You know, he always answers that prayer.
Yeah.
So just pray for that.
Okay. What other thoughts? Anything else that we didn't?
No, I think it's just a great text. Of course, I love the Gospel of John anyway. That's all I have.
Okay. Well, hopefully that's helpful to you. Even if it's just a few minutes like this every week, we would love just to be able to do that a little more, talk about the text some more. And honestly, what's cool is here in 3 weeks, you're going to be preaching
Nicodemus.
the text right before this
Yep.
with Nicodemus.
Yep.
And so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And as Trevor said, just hearing a great sermon from a great preacher. Not a good nap like I provide.
Oh, brother.
Church, we love you and we're thankful for you. Have a great week.
Amen.